My name is Vivian. I'm 43 years old, the mother of an 8-year-old girl, and I used to be the wife of a man the whole neighborhood thought was a role model. I was lying motionless in a hospital bed, my leg in a cast, my ribs aching. And yet there he was, the man who once swore to protect me, standing at my bedside, saying, "You're a burden, sign the papers." When I refused, he clenched his fists and lunged forward. In that moment I knew, if I stayed silent, my daughter would grow up trapped in the same toxic cycle. Have you ever been hurt by the person you once believed was your only safe place? Leave a comment if you've ever endured in silence. Hit like and subscribe if you believe women deserve to be heard. And now, let me tell you the story I almost didn't live to tell. I met Scott on a June afternoon at a community education seminar hosted by the city. Back then I was working in Pittsburgh as a financial analyst for a small investment fund. Scott was the speaker on stage, a science teacher honored as Inspiration of the Year. He told a story about teaching in a classroom where kids couldn't afford supplies, and how he created experiments using recycled plastic bottles. The room burst into applause. So did I. After his talk, Scott walked up to me and struck up a conversation like we were old friends. "We need more people like you in education. People whose eyes really listen," he said, his voice deep and magnetic. I wasn't someone who fell easily, but Scott made me feel seen, cared for. We dated for less than 8 months before he proposed. One evening, after cooking dinner together and rewatching an old Frank Capra film, he knelt down in the living room, opened a small ring box and said, "Vivian, you've spent your whole life calculating for everyone else. Let me take care of the rest." I didn't know that would be the last time I got to make a real choice. I quit my job 2 months after the wedding. Scott never forced me, he simply painted a gentle picture of the family dream. A warm home, dinner at 6, children's laughter in the kitchen, and me as the one who kept the fire of happiness alive. "No matter how good you are," he often said, "no one will ever love you like I do, like our child will. Don't waste time trying to prove anything else." I started to believe that maybe success didn't live in a high-rise office, but in the Sunday morning muffins I baked. At first, it felt like a dream. Scott came home on time, hugged me from behind while I cooked, kissed the back of my neck. He brought me flowers for no reason at all. When I caught a cold, he made honey ginger tea and read Robert Frost poetry at my bedside. I used to think, I'm the luckiest woman alive. Then I got pregnant with Mia. Pregnancy made me weaker, more tired, forgetful. Scott stopped reading poetry, stopped making breakfast. When I asked why, he chuckled, "I'm not a midwife, Viv. Are you testing me or being needy?" I laughed it off. Whenever I felt down, I reminded myself of his words, "Everything I do is for this family." After Mia was born, I wanted to hire a part-time helper while I recovered. Scott quietly opened his laptop, listed the costs, went over our budget, then said gently, "I thought you understood sacrifice. Don't be like those housewives out there, Viv. They've got money but no love. We're different, right?" And I believed him. I stopped seeing old friends. Scott said their advice was toxic, always urging me to be independent, like I was some kind of victim. I deactivated my social media. Scott said, "A happy woman doesn't need to prove anything." I cut off contact with my former boss. Scott said, "Any company that tries to keep an old employee by email doesn't really wish them well." He said these things lightly, like a breeze. Not threats, not commands, but enough to make me feel guilty for not listening. When Mia first crawled, I called Scott, overflowing with joy. He answered coldly, "I'm in a meeting, record it, I'll watch tonight." But that night, he forgot. I started feeling lost in the very role I'd chosen. But every time I wanted to speak up, Scott would do something that melted me. Cook dinner, buy me a dress I liked, or simply hold me and whisper, "I know you're tired, but you're stronger than you think." One day I blurted out, "Do you think I could go back to work?" Scott pressed his lips together. "Not impossible, but if Mia gets sick, who takes her to the doctor? If something happens at home, who picks up the pieces? I trusted you to be our foundation. Are you bored now?" I shook my head like a scolded child. There were nights I sat alone in the laundry room, gripping the sleeve of Scott's shirt without knowing if I was angry or just sad. I missed my old job. I missed being heard for my ideas, not just praised for making the perfect toast. Scott still maintained the perfect image in front of friends. Devoted husband, dedicated father, model teacher. He talked about his students with bright eyes. But at home he'd turn to me and ask, "Do you even notice this kitchen towel smells?" Like that was all I was worth. I didn't realize I was shrinking behind him, like a shadow. Until one day, I couldn't see myself in the mirror anymore. And that was only the beginning. I don't remember the last time Scott complimented me. Maybe it was when I made his favorite lasagna on our second Christmas. Back when he'd still sit at the table without his phone. After that, every word from him felt like criticism. What do you even do besides cook and complain? Don't talk to me about being tired. I teach all day. You stay home. Mia still can't read the alphabet. You've got all day and can't handle that? I used to respond. At first gently. What do? I cook 3 meals, clean, help with homework, do school runs, pay bills. Scott cut me off. You want a medal? Spare me. Everyone does that. You're not a victim. Every protest became a fault. Every time I spoke up, he'd go silent. For days. Then one night, he'd pour wine, smile, and say, I know you're stressed, but you should be grateful, Viv. Not everyone gets a husband like me. I nodded like a reflex. I handled our finances using my personal savings. The money I'd tucked away back when I worked. Scott said he'd help, but after his salary got cut, he told me to cover things for now. He'd pay me back later. Month after month, utility bills, Mia's tuition, groceries, fixing the washing machine, all came from my account. When I asked about the joint savings in both our names, he said, No one's touching it. I'm using it for investments, for Mia's future. Years later, I found out those investments were trips to Vegas with his old college friends, the ones he claimed were just poker buddies. Mia started flinching at the sound of her father's footsteps. At the first click of the door around 5:30, she'd rush to clean up her toys and hide in her room. One evening, I heard her whisper, Mom, does Dad hit you? No, sweetheart. He's a little strict. Mia said softly, I don't like when he yells at you. I packed a suitcase once when Mia was 2. I held her in my arms and made it to the front door before Scott came home. When he saw the bags, he didn't yell. He dropped to his knees. Cried. Like a child. I'm sorry, Viv. I'm under so much pressure. I love you. I swear I'll change. He raised his hand to the wedding photo on the wall. I turned back. The second time I tried to leave was when I found out Scott had withdrawn money from my savings account under the excuse of paying tuition. He stood behind me in silence as I opened the statement. You trying to control me now? He asked, voiced low and icy enough that I dropped the mouse. That night he apologized again. Bought me a new vacuum. Soon after, Scott started installing cameras around the house. He said it was because the neighbor's dog got stolen. I didn't object, at first. Until I noticed cameras in the kitchen, living room, and Mia's study room. I asked, What do you need to monitor in there? Scott smiled. To give you peace of mind while doing housework? I'll make sure our daughter's safe. There wasn't a camera in my bedroom, but I knew he could hear me through the mic, because once, after I let out a tired sigh following a draining phone call with the insurance company, Scott immediately texted, You've got that much time to whine over the phone? I started to feel like I was living in a glass cage. No one tied me down, but every choice already felt decided for me. Scott said he had a herniated disc after slipping on the stairs at school, but I never saw any medical records. No doctor came to the house. The pills he took weren't prescribed. Still, he declared, I can't lift anything heavy. You need to understand that. From then on, I did everything. Carried the sack of rice, pulled weeds, painted the fence, hauled Mia's birthday tables out to the yard. Anytime I asked Scott for help, he'd frown, rub his back and say, Are you trying to cripple me? I don't know when I started believing that being strong meant needing no help. Every time my wrist ached after lifting a water jug, I told myself, It's fine, I can do it. I shared all this with an old friend, Amanda, the only college friend I still secretly stayed in touch with. She said, Viv, you don't have to get hit for it to be abuse. Emotional control, isolation, they're all violence too. I stayed silent, but that night I replayed the footage, watching myself scrubbing floors near midnight, folding laundry without a word, rushing to set the table when Scott's car pulled in. I saw myself, but didn't recognize who I was. And I began to wonder, if I disappeared one day, who would notice first? And who would grieve? Scott, or the obedient wife he had crafted in his mind? I didn't have an answer, but that question stirred something in me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not endurance, but a seed of life trying to breathe. It was a Friday. Light rain, a chilly breeze. I was on my way home after stopping by the bakery to order the cat-shaped cake Mia wanted for her 8th birthday. She had talked about it non-stop for 3 weeks, saying, "As long as I get that cake and my best friends come, I'll be happy. You don't have to decorate much, Mom." I was carrying bags, scrolling through my to-do list, walking across the parking lot when everything went black. No horn, not even a screech, just a white flash, and then nothing. When I came to, the cold white ceiling of the hospital glared so bright it stung my eyes. The first thing I felt was weight. My whole body felt like it was anchored by stone. The second was pain, sharp pain shooting from my ribs through my back, pulsing with every breath. A nurse's voice came from somewhere. "Mrs. Cartwright, if you can hear me, please don't try to move. You've fractured 2 ribs, your left leg is in a cast, and you have some internal bruising." I couldn't ask what had happened. My mouth was so dry the words caught in my throat. The first few days blurred together. I drifted in and out of painkillers and unfamiliar faces. Every morning a young nurse adjusted the oxygen. An older doctor scribbled notes on the board and left. No familiar voices. No one named Cartwright. I didn't see Scott. Each time the door opened, I turned my head, and each time I was disappointed. I wondered, had anyone told him? Or was he too busy teaching? Or maybe he simply didn't care? On day 14, my mother arrived from Harrisburg. She brushed my hair back, eyes rimmed red. "You don't have to say anything, I know. We'll take care of you, just rest." My mother was 71. Her hands were cold but steady like mountain stone. In that moment I felt like a child again, allowed to be weak. On the afternoon of day 15, Scott showed up. Not with flowers, not with tears, and not with our daughter. He walked in like he was entering a boardroom. Crisp shirt, clean shoes. "You're awake." I said nothing. 15 days of waiting had hardened into a stone lodged in my chest. Scott pulled a chair, sat down, and opened his leather bag. He took out a beige folder and placed it on the table beside my bed. "This is a temporary financial power of attorney, just so I can handle things. Bills, bank stuff, Mia's tuition. You can sign now. They need it submitted this week." "Scott," I rasped, "I can't even walk yet." He shrugged. "That's why I need it. I have to manage what you've left unfinished." I turned my face away. I didn't cry, but a coldness started seeping into my skin from somewhere deep inside. "I'm not signing," I said slowly. He chuckled, but it wasn't the gentle laugh I once knew. It was tilted, half mocking. "You think your voice still matters?" He set the pen down, brushed his hand across the nightstand like checking for dust. "You're lying here useless. I'm the one running around like a maniac." "Scott," I interrupted. "This was an accident. I was hit. I didn't choose this." He looked up, eyes like ice. "You didn't choose it, but I'm the one paying the price. Who's caring for the kid? Who's paying off the credit cards? Who had to cancel a parent-teacher meeting to change your mother's diaper? Leave my mother out of this." Scott's voice dropped, sharp and hard. "You think not signing means I'll fall apart? I've carried you for years. Now it's your turn to cooperate." "No, you didn't carry me, you carried your image." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Then he stood abruptly, scooped up the papers, and let out a dramatic sigh. "You'll regret this." He left without another word, didn't ask a single thing about Mia. I started recording Scott's voice in week 3 at the hospital, Nothing fancy, using the app connected to the home security system he'd installed to protect the family, after he forgot to log out of the iPad during a visit with Mia. At the time, I didn't have a plan. I wasn't thinking about court or lawyers. I only knew one thing: I needed to hold on to the truth, no matter what. Because I was too used to doubting my own memory every time Scott laughed and said, "You imagine too much." From the hospital bed, I watched quietly. Through the camera in the living room, Maya was studying alone, hunched under the desk lamp. My mother folded laundry, glancing at the clock. And there was Scott, sprawled on the couch, TV remote in hand, complaining into the phone. She's lying there, refusing to sign, like I owe her something. I saved that clip, labeled it Scott 9:42 p.m. Then I saved more. The times he yelled at my mother for letting the kid watch TV too long. The times he told Mia, "Dad's got nothing left to lose if your mom keeps acting like this." Each recording was a sliver of truth I'd once been afraid to face. And I kept them all, like keeping myself. Scott returned to the hospital on a Tuesday afternoon, just after my IV had been removed for light movement training. My mother was picking Mia up from school and the nurse was down the hall with paperwork. The door was ajar. I didn't call for anyone. He came in with the same old folder, this time with a fresh Parker pen clipped inside. "This time, I'm not playing games, Vivian," he said, voice stripped of patience. "Sign it. Or I pull everything from the joint account. What are you going to live on?" I looked at him. "I stopped living on fear, Scott." He froze. Then smirked. "You think that makes you strong?" "No. I'm just done." I turned to press the nurse call button. He lunged, his hand clamped around my wrist, his face inches from mine. "You're going to ruin everything. Do you think anyone's going to believe you, a housewife with a broken leg, whining and playing victim?" I closed my eyes, not from fear, but to etch it in memory. Every word he said, every echo in the room, every angry breath brushing my face. "You're already recording yourself, Scott." He stiffened. "What did you say?" "There's a security camera in the hallway, and one in this room, right up there." I tilted my head slightly toward the corner of the ceiling. "The hospital installed them last year, for abuse cases." Scott's face drained from red to pale. He let go of my wrist, but before he could turn, the door flew open. Nurse Anna stood there, stunned. Behind her was a security guard, radio on his shoulder and a steely look in his eyes. "You need to leave now," the nurse said, without asking why. Scott took a step back but still turned his head. "You'll regret this." The security guard stepped forward, placing himself between me and Scott. "We'll call the police if you don't leave this facility immediately." Scott was escorted out, the door closed, and in that moment my chest felt heavy, not with pain, but with the finality that nothing would ever go back to the way it was. Nurse Anna sat beside me, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you okay, Vivian?" "I'm not physically hurt, I just need to know he's not coming back." "We'll file an internal report. And you have the right to request a restraining order." I looked her in the eye. "I want to file one. And I want to speak to a lawyer." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay still, staring at the dim ceiling lights, thinking about all the years I'd been alive without truly living. That was enough. I contacted Monica 3 days after filing for the restraining order. We'd been college roommates. She studied law, I studied finance. Years had passed, but all it took was one phone call, and her voice was the same. Sharp, precise, unwavering. "Viv," Monica said when she visited me at the hospital, a file folder already in hand, "if you're ready to stand up, I'll go the distance with you." Monica began guiding me through everything we needed to gather: copies of the home security footage, nurses' logs documenting Scott's behavior at the hospital, the security guard's statement, and especially the audio clips I had quietly saved from the camera system over the past few weeks. "Every word he says, every instance of emotional abuse, it's all evidence," Monica emphasized. "We won't let your story be dismissed as emotional bias." I requested copies of the camera files from the company Scott had originally used. With the serial number and the login thanks to my earlier password reset, they had no reason to deny me. The young technician even looked surprised at the number of devices connected and the volume of stored data. "You still use this system?" he asked, tilting his head while looking at the laptop screen. "I used to," I said. "Now, I'm using it for what it should have been." I downloaded a series of clips, including Scott yelling at Mia for spilling milk, throwing a TV remote when she cried, and one evening where he slammed the table and shouted, "You trying to turn my daughter into the same weak mess as you?" Monica watched those clips with me, face unreadable, but when we were done she turned off the screen and said slowly, "Vivian, this isn't a divorce. This is long-term abuse. You have every right to ask for full custody, and to countersue if he tries to go after your assets." I pressed my lips together. "I'm not looking for revenge. I want my daughter to grow up without being afraid of the front door opening every evening." Then we do it for her. The following week, Scott's mother came to the hospital. I wasn't surprised. She had always kept her distance during our marriage. But whenever Scott had a problem, big or small, she appeared like a loyal shadow. She wore a thick beige sweater and held a vintage leather purse. Her face looked tired but composed. As she stepped in, she didn't look at me. She placed her bag on the chair and pulled it closer. "You know why I'm here," she said, eyes still avoiding mine. "I'm not taking sides, but Scott is my son. He's not perfect, I know, but you can't blow things up over a few issues. Every family has its ups and downs." I gripped the edge of the bed sheet. "Scott isn't going through a down, ma'am. He drags others down with him. I'm not denying he has a temper, but Vivian, think of Mia. Don't destroy this family over pride." "You think this is about pride?" I opened a drawer of the bedside table, took out a USB drive encased in hard plastic, and placed it on the table. "It has a clip of Scott calling your granddaughter a burden. Please watch it before talking to me about family." She flinched. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm showing people what I was once too afraid to face." She went quiet for a moment, then stood up. "I will watch it." I didn't stop her, because I knew that once the truth comes out, no one gets to return to the old roles they used to play. Outside, the leaves had started to change color. Inside me, something was changing too. Still me, but no longer folded in on myself. The Montgomery County Courthouse, a late autumn morning. Leaves rustled along the steps as I entered the courtroom, where the cold fluorescent lights and high ceilings made everyone feel small, even when they'd done nothing wrong. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Monica, composed, sharp in a charcoal gray blazer, a thick case file in her lap. My heart pounded, but my hands didn't shake. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I knew I wasn't standing alone anymore. Scott was only a few feet away. Same slicked back hair, neatly pressed black suit. The picture of a model teacher. He smiled at the judge when his name was called. Beside him was his lawyer, a smooth-talking middle-aged man known for handling high-profile divorces in Philadelphia. From the very first statement, Scott spun a new story. "I'm not perfect, but I've been a dedicated father, a husband who carried the weight of the family through my wife's mental instability. And when she had her accident, I had to stop teaching, do her share of the household duties, while still raising our child, paying bills, and holding this family together." I stared directly at him as he spoke. That familiar face I once trusted, but today, hearing him twist the truth didn't hurt. It felt hollow, unrecognizable. Then it was Monica's turn. She stood, voice low and steady. No theatrics, just precision. "Your Honor," Monica began, "the defendant has fabricated a false narrative to conceal years of sustained physical, emotional, and financial abuse against my client, Mrs. Vivian Cartwright." The large screen to the right lit up. A video played. Scott storming into the hospital room, shouting, slamming his hand on the foot of the bed, then leaning down, snarling threats inches from my face. My voice was barely audible. "I'm not signing." Then came the moment he clenched his fist and punched near my abdomen. I curled inward, gasping. The courtroom went silent. Someone exhaled sharply. The judge frowned, tapping the pen lightly on the desk. Monica didn't stop. She played a second video, footage from the home camera. Mia was sitting at the table doing homework. Scott stormed over, yanked the worksheet from her hands, and yelled, Stupid, just like your mom. In the clip, she trembled in fear, trying to hide behind her workbook. I swallowed hard. We have more footage, Monica said, but I believe what we've shown is enough for the court to understand this wasn't a momentary lapse. Scott's lawyer stood and objected. He claimed the videos could be edited, that Scott had been under work stress, and that the defendant was the sole financial provider for the household. The judge tilted his head. What about the claim that the defendant cannot perform heavy physical tasks due to a spinal injury? Monica smiled. Your Honor, if I may present one final clip. The video played. Scott was seen lifting a sofa from the garage to the backyard, joking with a neighbor. I'm back in action. My wife would think I'm filming an action movie. He kicked a soccer ball to the neighbor, spun around, and stretched his back, fluid, pain-free. The clip was dated just 3 days after he refused to help with yard work, citing back pain. The courtroom went silent again. The judge nodded, flipping through the file in front of him. Scott's lawyer faltered. He tried to soften the blow. My client may have acted inappropriately, but it wasn't intentional. He used to be a good husband. Monica stayed calm. She simply said, Your Honor, abuse doesn't have to be loud to be real. It can arrive through cold words, intentional silence, or a hand gripping the wrist of a woman trying to protect her child. My eyes met Monica's. I said nothing, but I knew in my heart, whatever the outcome today, I was silent no more. Scott was called to the stand. He looked at me for a brief moment, then turned away. He tried to claim I was exaggerating, that every couple has conflict. But when Monica rose to cross-examine him, presenting copies of medical reports, excerpts from nurses' statements, and photos of the injuries from the hospital, his voice began to falter. I sat still, hands clasped, unmoving, but I could hear the tremble in Scott's words, and for the first time in years I saw him as smaller than me, not because of power, but because the truth had finally been named. I didn't look at Scott when the judge read the sentence. I listened as the middle-aged man's voice echoed through the courtroom. 2 years in prison, 3 years probation, full restitution for medical costs, and child support for the post-divorce period. Scott remained frozen, his hands clenched behind his back. He didn't turn to look at me. I didn't need him to. The morning after the hearing, I woke up in the house I had called home for nearly 12 years. Everything was still in place. The wedding photo in the hallway, the cream-colored sofa where Mia used to nap, the crayon marks she drew on the wall when she was 3. But the space felt different, as if the memories had drained all the warmth from the walls. Mia curled up by the window, hugging her worn-out stuffed bear. Can we move somewhere else, Mom? I turned to her. You want to go? Yes. I don't want to live in the house where Dad used to yell. I didn't need another reason. That evening, as the streetlights blurred through the car window, I folded what we needed. A few clothes, Mia's vaccination records, the legal documents Monica had prepared, and my father's old pendulum clock. The only thing I kept, not for its value, but for what it meant. My father used to hang it in the kitchen where he read the newspaper each morning. When he passed away, my mother gave it to me and said, Don't let anyone else decide your time for you. I didn't fully understand her words then. Now I did. Scott's mother sent a handwritten letter through my lawyer, a white envelope written in delicate cursive. Vivian, I didn't know everything, but I stayed silent for too long. I'm sorry I didn't see the truth sooner. If there's anything I can do to make it right, please let me know. I read it, folded it, and wrote nothing back. Mia and I moved to a 2-bedroom apartment in a residential neighborhood 15 miles away. Not too big, no yard, but sunlight filled it every morning, and children's laughter echoed from the balconies. I painted the walls olive green. I let Mia tape up her drawings on the fridge, and I hung a photo of the two of us walking in the park, replacing the wedding picture. I sold most of the old furniture. Everything I had bought for the perfect family now felt heavy, as if they held all the unspoken things I'd once swallowed. Whenever someone asked, What do you want to keep from the old house? I answered, Only what doesn't make me feel small. Some nights, Mia curled into my arms and asked, Mom, are we still a family? I stroked her hair and said softly, We've always been a family, it's just that now no one in it makes Mommy cry quietly at night. She nodded and hugged her bear tighter. I don't have dreams about Dad yelling anymore. I held her close. In that new room, my father's pendulum clock still ticks softly, but now, each tick wasn't a reminder that I was falling behind. It was a reminder. Time belongs to me now. Our new apartment sat on the third floor of an old brick building in South Philadelphia. The wooden stairs creaked with every step. The living room window looked out over a small bookstore, where every morning the owner rolled bookshelves onto the sidelock like a quiet ritual. I liked that slowness. No one rushed. No one made me feel like I had to catch up anymore. At night, after Mia fell asleep, I settled at the kitchen table, the same spot where I once calculated bills and balanced credit cards. Now it held only an old laptop, a cup of tea, and a blank screen. I signed up for an online creative writing course, prompted by Monica's gentle suggestion. You told the truth in court, now tell it in your own way. The first post I shared on my blog wasn't an accusation, just a short passage. Abuse isn't always shouting. Sometimes it's the cold glance that keeps your head down. It's the phrase, "You're too sensitive," repeated so often you begin to believe you're weak. It's when you can't remember the last time you laughed without glancing around first. I didn't expect anything. I posted it because I needed to let it out. But then, a message arrived from a woman in New Jersey. I thought I was the only one. Then dozens, then hundreds more came in. Some shared stories about their husbands, others about their mothers. A few sent just one sentence. "Thank you for naming the pain I never had words for." I began writing more consistently. Not to recount suffering, but to name what had silently cracked me open. I wrote about the first night after court, when I couldn't sleep because the room was too quiet. I wrote about how Mia still flinched at the sound of footsteps when the neighbors slammed their door. I wrote about the morning I stood frozen before the mirror, stunned that the woman staring back looked at peace. The blog spread. A local newspaper reached out asking to republish my piece, "How to Know You're Being Emotionally Manipulated in Your Own Home." Then an editor from an independent publisher in New York sent an email. "We'd like to talk about a book." I took a night to reply. Was I ready to bring the whole story into the light? Not as a victim but as a storyteller. In the end, I wrote, "I don't have a happy ending, but I have a truth that was once silenced. If that means something, I'm ready to tell it." I titled the book The Quiet Bruises. I spent 6 months writing it. Some nights I had to stand up halfway through, step out onto the balcony, take a deep breath before I could keep typing. Some passages I wrote from memory. Others I revisited through the recordings. Hands shaking, heart aching. Mia sometimes asked, "Why are you crying when you write, Mom?" I held her close. Because I'm telling stories that, if I don't let out, will stay inside me forever. When the manuscript was done, my editor called, her voice thick with emotion. "Vivian, you didn't write a book. You wrote the hidden fear of an entire generation of women." I'm only writing what I once couldn't say. The day the advance copy of the book arrived, I received it by mail. The cover showed an open hand holding a single white daisy, like a symbol of something fragile, yet unbroken. I placed it on the wooden shelf by the window, right next to my father's pendulum clock. As the hand ticked to the next soft beat, I felt a calm I had never known before. Not because the past had been erased, but because it now had somewhere to belong. Not inside me, but on paper. The first book signing was held at a small bookstore at the end of an old neighborhood, where the air smelled of pine wood, soft yellow lights glowed, and the shelves were labeled by handwritten signs. I didn't know what to expect. Maybe a few curious passers-by, or 1 or 2 quiet readers who wanted to say thank you. But when I walked in, over 20 people were already waiting. Each one held a copy of The Quiet Bruises, some marked with colorful sticky notes. A woman in her 70s, wearing a charcoal wool coat, was wiping her glasses. I took my seat, the pen slightly cold in my hand. The first to approach was a young woman, around 25, her eyes misty. "You're the reason I left my boyfriend. I used to think I was too weak to start over." I signed her copy. Not much. Just, "We're not weak, we're healing." Then came a man with his daughter. Then an older couple. Then the silver-haired woman I would never forget. She never said her name. Simply handed me the book. Then gently took my hand. "Thank you, I was Vivian too." I looked at her. She wasn't crying, but her hand trembled slightly, as if this was the first time in her life someone had said her real name aloud. I held her hand in both of mine, no words. As the sky dimmed, Mia and I left the bookstore, her little arms clutching a tote bag printed with a white daisy, the book's symbol. She hopped along the brick sidewalk. "Mom, are you famous now?" I laughed. "No, sweetheart, I'm telling stories. But everyone came to hear you. Because my story sounds like theirs." Mia squeezed my hand. "Then when I grow up, can I tell stories too?" I bent down and looked into her eyes. "You can tell them anytime you want. And you don't need anyone's permission." We crossed the street, the golden light casting long shadows of our footsteps. I turned and looked at the little face beside me. The face that once made me keep enduring and later taught me how to rise. I whispered, not for her to hear but as a message to myself. "I'm not perfect, but I'm not afraid anymore." That night, after Mia fell asleep, I stood by the apartment window, city lights blinking like falling stars. My father's pendulum clock ticked, steadily, unhurried. If you've ever felt yourself shrinking inside your own home, if you've ever stayed silent to preserve a roof that only left you cracked inside, then maybe my story is a piece of your story, too. I'm not telling this for pity. I'm telling it because I believe, when one woman dares to say what she's hidden for too long, others begin to find the language for their own pain. What do you think about my and Mia's journey? Have you ever seen yourself in a hard decision? In a kitchen where no one asked if you were okay, or in a quiet evening that felt like it was squeezing your chest? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe what you write will help someone out there feel a little less alone. And if you want to continue walking with me through stories of family, quiet strength, and rebuilding after the seemingly unforgivable, hit subscribe. Each week, I'll tell a new story. Not fairy tales, but real lives where resilience isn't found in punches, but in each time we choose to rise, gently but firmly. Thank you for listening. We'll meet again in the next story.